Hi everyone, welcome to Lecture 9 where I'm going to be talking today about managing productive capacity and customer demand, a real challenge for us in services marketing. Okay, so just some terminology. What do we mean by capacity? Well, the extent to which a business can serve a number of customers before service quality declines due to exceeding supply. So it's not what you think, like the number of available seats or the number of airline flights. It's actually the extent to which we can service a market effectively before service quality declines. Now, this is an issue in services marketing as services are perishable and cannot be stored. So, for example, here's a hotel resort with nobody visiting for whatever reasons. That service, of course, is going off, if you like. It can only be there for a short period of time. We can't physically store all the people who provide that service. So it's always an issue managing capacity and demand. Now, of course, issues in capacity is that there are physical limitations of what we can do, and here's a number of them. So train, limited number of seats; hospital, limited number of beds; a movie theatre or a restaurant, limited number of seats; electricity, limited capacity due to power generation. And of course, demand can be often greater than capacity or less than capacity, and these create issues for us in terms of management. So demand is defined as a consumer's desire for a product, not necessarily the price I'll pay. It's important to understand how the consumer demand is derived. What triggers the demand? Is it seasonal? Are there various times of the day? Are there various parts of the market that have greater demands? For example, more elderly people have greater demands on the hospital system. Where it originates, geographically, and at what time. How customer demand can be forecast. We need to forecast demand so that we can manage capacity around it. Achieving these requirements begins with segmenting and understanding our customer base, our target market. Also, an organisation's capacity can change. We call this the adaptive service capacity, and some organisations have a greater capacity to make changes than others. So, for example, for a hospital with its emergency services, they have to remain open 24 hours, whereas services like in education or banking, so on, these don't necessarily have to be available face-to-face in 24-hour cycle. So here's an idea of understanding demands. This is for the new North West train line in Sydney in 2021. And what you can see here is that the load peaks at around Epping and Macquarie because gradually as we move along the line, more people get off, and of course a whole bunch of people then get off at Chatswood to change trains. So knowing something like this is important because it gives you an idea of capacity and demand. So there are, of course, fluctuations for the demand of services. So public transport, very high during morning and rush hour, pretty quiet then. Movie theatres, weekends and holidays. Beauty parlours, very high during festive, Christmas, Father's Day, Mother's Day, and marriage seasons. When's marriage? Usually around about springtime. Airlines, very high in school holidays and business working hours, low demand for flights at odd hours. So you can see why the issues of capacity and demand are so important here, because it affects profitability and our ability to deliver good service. So, of course, depending on the match between capacity and demand, these create a number of issues that need to be managed for us. So if we've got excess capacity, as in the first slide, we've got resources that are wasted and we're losing money, or it's an inefficient use of public resources. If we've got a balance between capacity and demand, this is the best situation to be in. If the demand exceeds an optimum capacity and lies at total capacity, then the quality of service suffers. Think about being on a train and standing up for 2 hours. You would say at the end of that the quality of service definitely suffered, or being in a restaurant and waiting a long time for your meal. If the demand exceeds stretchable capacity, in other words, people are queuing up and we can't put out any more capacity at all, then the service quality will decline even more sharply. So an example of this might be that a restaurant is overbooked, ski fields are overbooked, hospital services are beyond coping because of the flu season. So what we would say is that the service quality there declines sharply. If we have excess demand and we can't meet that demand, we've then got lost business. So you can see here that some of these approaches are about increasing capacity or about managing capacity and managing demand. Segmenting the market by customer size and value also will help us meet factors and demand capacity. For example, business travellers in airlines. Organisations themselves, of course, can shape demand by pricing and also increasing capacity and providing for the queuing of the services. Balancing this are the costs and risks and benefits that organisations may have. So some organisations, be they luxury hotels, luxury resorts, will try and avoid customer experience when capacity constraints on others, while others do not have the resources to satisfy all customer demands. So create a demand at a time where they can offer the customers the best possible service. So budget hotels might be an example of that. So what then are the challenges? And here's the challenge you can see that's probably occurring in the ski season right now. The challenges are that firstly have got resource-based issues in the capacity we can do, the people that we provide the services, the processes or service process we provide. So a simple one here is how you get people up to the ski fields and back. The physical evidence, the servicescape. So people are evaluating their holiday here by the degree of crowding and enjoyment, financial capacities, and the time when people want to go and use the service. The opportunities then are how we manage demand and capacity adjustments. So one idea is adapting the service capacity, and we'll look at that in a minute. And really what we're doing is we're focusing on the needs of the target market in periods of high customer demand. So we might have strategies to increase the capacity or perhaps decrease capacity if demand for a service begins to decrease at a point in time where it is no longer profitable. So what then are some strategies to manage capacity? Well, we can stretch and shrink the level of capacity. So we see this with bus and timetables, we see this with airline timetables, that there are more flights in the middle of the day when people want to travel with the airlines, and there are more trains and buses in the beginning and end of the day. We can employ a part-time and casual workforce, and as Australia's moved more towards a service economy, you can see why this has occurred. Employ a multi-skilled workforce. So the idea here that in a cafe you might employ not only waitresses but people who can prepare food. You might share capacity. So you might share capacity with other outlets in the ski fields. You might share capacity with the transport system by integrating bus, rail and ferry movements of people in rush hour. Capacity sharing often occurs with airlines, with joint alliances they have. We can try and get the customer involved, ask them to book it ahead, ask them to come at a particular time by changing pricing, or we might charge a higher price in a peak time. And we can market unsold capacity, so that which we haven't got, we can often these days online provide last minute deals for any excess capacity that we have. What then are some approaches to managing demand? Well, there are two ways, strategies that deal with unforeseen imbalances between capacity and demand. The first is, well, we should be really gathering information and big data about the trends and when this occurs. This can occur via a reservation system. We can study past trends. That's often done in electricity with peak pricing. We can also begin by marketing special occasions, and that might also help us in creating some of these imbalances. Strategies that deal with foreseen imbalances, where we know that there are certain factors that create an imbalance between capacity and demand. We can alter the service, provide a more basic service, one that's not requires so much use of the service capacity to meet demand. An example of this is simply standing up in a train. or we might alter a fixed menu at a high area of demand. We can alter price, so we can increase or lower it according to areas of peak or excess demand. We can modify the location of the service. So what we might do here is provide incentives for people not to stay on the snowfields, but just outside the snowfields. Okay. We can also, by promotion, modify when the consumer makes the decision to purchase the product. And we can use a combination of these, as you can see over here, with Trivago using a combination of promotion. These are last-minute deals that I found on hotels in Sydney, and you can see that one of them is the Hyatt Regency in Sydney, which is normally $609, but because of low demand now is $188. Of course, that would be much higher during New Year's Eve. Value co-creation can also be used, and here we're really asking the consumer to be more involved in the production of the service without perhaps affecting the service quality. Self-service technology can be used here as well. So, for example, the recent introduction of the Opal card in the Sydney New South Wales public transport helps make the delivery of services easier. It also means we can track customer movements more accurately, and so we can manage the imbalances between capacity and demand. That's it for now. There are many other examples in your textbook and online topics which cover this fascinating subject. Thanks.